there needs to be a balance, right? Like in investing, we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. We want to be diversified. Just because your agency or one asset class is doing really well, 1 year doesn't mean it's going to continue to do that well in the future. So you need to plan accordingly and protect yourself and your family.
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel. I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. Today, I am joined by Jason Peck, who is a certified financial planner with EverWise Wealth Management. And he's here today to talk about the specifics of managing personal finances and building wealth as someone who owns a creative or professional services agency, some of the things that you might have to do differently than other people, and his experience working with a lot of creative professionals in the space. So with all of that, Jason, I appreciate you making time to help us understand what to do with all these profits that we generate after listening to Parakeeto's show and getting super profitable.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcel, for having me on.
I'm excited to chat with you. So let's start with a little bit of background. What got you into the kind of financial planning, wealth management space, and specifically working with a lot of creative entrepreneurs and professional services entrepreneurs?
Was always interested in the financial world. My dad's been a financial planner and advisor, my whole life. So I grew up with an understanding of it and a passion for it. Eventually just decided I wanted to switch careers. I wanted to get out from behind the laptop, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, board meetings, and get more deeply involved in people's lives. It kind of came down to the rocking chair test I read about somewhere. Basically, the idea is when you're old and sitting in your rocking chair, are you going to be proud of yourself for doing whatever new thing you're thinking about doing or regret not doing it? And that was 5 years ago, and I hope I can do this another 25 years. I love marketing. I still do. Taught me a lot of things. But I think most importantly that having the right people, the right goals, processes and analytics in place can lead to really great results, especially if you kind of layer that on with creativity. And just like with financial planning, marketing taught me that it all starts with goals and being proactive about the things that you can improve and optimize.
So that kind of speaks to how you got into financial planning from, a career in marketing and technology. What is it that drew you to specializing in working with agencies specifically?
I think in my prior career, I was lucky to interview, hire, work with a variety of agencies and marketers. They're a huge part of why we were able to have the success that we had, especially at my last company. And I just always loved and admired how agency people can take challenges and find creative solutions to them. And having been on the agency side and the client side, just found that I really enjoyed working with them. It's fun to work with people that share your desire to make an impact. As I started to reach out to people from my past, people I'd worked with in my past, to let them know what I was doing now, people were really happy to and willing to share things that they had done well with their personal finances, things that they wish they had known, biggest mistakes they've seen, and things like that. And I heard a lot of interesting stories where maybe if someone had known to ask their financial advisor about something, like say how to finance a buyout, for example, or if their financial advisor had brought up something proactively to them, or if they started building wealth outside their agency earlier, they might have done things differently. And so I don't know, it was just kind of a natural fit. And I felt like working with agency owners was something that I could have fun doing and also add value.
So since, getting into this space 5 years ago, working with a number of firm owners, you've kind of identified some differences between those that run, creative digital agencies, professional services firms in general, and other types of businesses in terms of how they should be approaching their personal finance, or things that they should be thinking about slightly differently. So broad strokes, what are some of the key differences between someone running an agency and maybe another entrepreneur or just a general person in terms of how they might want to be approaching their personal financial strategy?
Yep. As you know, an agency is a cash flow business, can be steady, can be unpredictable. 1 year or time period can be awesome. The next year may not be. So dividends and profit sharing can be meaningful or non-existent. So that's definitely a challenge. Agencies typically require the owner's active participation, not always, but many cases. So this is a real challenge if the agency owner wants to stop working. Another thing is that an agency is not a liquid asset. Like most service businesses, most of your equity is tied up in the business. It's not impossible to have a liquidity event and an exit, but it's very hard because clients are often coming in because of the owner's unique knowledge and expertise. And even when it happens, it's 9 times out of 10, it's not life-changing money. Another big one is that the agency owners, it's the agency's biggest asset, but on the same side, same time at the other side, it's also the biggest liability. So if there's an owner has a health issue, or a key partner has a health issue or a disability or death, that can have very real consequences on the agency's finances and oftentimes, your family's finances. And I guess to kind of wrap this one up, I'd say that agency owners can be so focused on the work sometimes that they neglect their own personal finances. That they started this in many cases because they love the work and they're awesome at it. But because of this, they don't always have the desire or the time or the ability to think about their financial situation and think about the future. It's easy to kick the can down the road when there always seems like something else with the agency or clients that's a higher priority.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people listening that can resonate with that that feeling of like, oh, we just kind of have to get through this next thing, or we just got to solve this next problem, or we just got to get that next client, and going in some cases years deferring personal income, reinvesting your own savings back into the business to fund certain things, and then lifting their heads up, several years later and recognizing like, wait a second, where is all my wealth? And is it in a state that I can actually benefit from it? So, you mentioned some, I think, really important ideas here, which are the unpredictable nature of running an agency. It is fickle in that sense. And I think a lot of people have had that experience of like having a great year followed by a not so great year and riding that kind of cash flow roller coaster. You mentioned the often the reality that owners are fairly integral to the running of the business, to the value of the business, often for very long periods of time, and they might never exit that state. And then the final thing that you mentioned, which is absolutely true, is there aren't a ton of liquidity events, and the liquidity events that do occur are often not life-changing, either because the valuation isn't life-changing, and or often also because the terms do not create a massive windfall of liquidity at the time of closing. And a lot of the compensation is often going to be in the form of stock options, in the form of kind of milestone or earnout based compensation, those kinds of things. So with all of those things in mind, how does that in practice kind of change how somebody might approach their financial plan if they're running an agency, and all of those things, are to a degree true for them?
Yeah, I think it's become super important that you can't rely on the agency for paying for your retirement or paying for your lifestyle, and you have to plan for what happens if you can't work or you want to stop working. So it's really important to build wealth outside the agency. And when I say that, I mean having money in diversified investments that are saved in retirement accounts and taxable investment accounts. That's completely separate from that agency. I think if you don't build wealth outside the agency. This is just, it creates risk and a lack of flexibility. I've heard many stories of owners being unable to take a break or retire from work because they need that agency income to fund their lifestyle. And I call this being captured by the creative. So as you get closer to retirement or a work optional lifestyle, you don't want to feel like you have to work because you have no other options. Or maybe one day you simply can't work anymore due to an illness or an injury. Like I have a client who was in a motorcycle wreck many years ago and unfortunately had a traumatic brain injury. He's okay now, but he can't do all the things that he used to do work-wise. So I think also having that wealth outside the agency can mean that you don't feel as much pressure to sell, maybe. Like maybe the agency is doing well and someone wants to buy it, but the price isn't great. You're in a much better negotiating position if you don't need the money from the sale versus if you did. And I think, one of the more undervalued uses of money is having it so that if a crisis or something unexpected comes up, it doesn't ruin your month or year, kind of impact your overall financial goals. So building wealth outside the agencies isn't just nice to have; it's a must have.
So there's a whole bunch of things that we can talk about at this juncture. I'll just start by sharing some observations because I've seen people on both sides of the spectrum. There's the agency owner that is too conservative and keeps a lot of their cash in the business, often more than they need, right? That can be a mistake. There's also on the other side of the spectrum, the owner that starves their business of cash and pulls every dollar that they can out to use for their own lifestyle and so on. There's the owner that had like one good year and then adjusted their lifestyle up to what that one good year looked like, and then is struggling to keep up with that lifestyle every year thereafter. So they're not really thinking about building wealth more so than just kind of like creating a lifestyle that depends on a lot of cash flow that their business may or may not be able to create. So there's a lot of pitfalls to watch out for. What is your framework for kind of making sure that an agency owner that you're working with is thinking through their financial plan in the right way and has practical steps to start building that wealth outside the business?
Yeah, I'd say it starts with financial planning in general requires a deep understanding of the person, what's important, where are they at right now, where do they want to be in the future, and so with that in mind, we look at kind of 9 key areas for personal financial plans for owners. Number 1 kind of starts with relationships. Who's important? What family do you take care of now? Who might you have to take care of in the future? This kind of thing shapes how you think about your goals and your risk management. You might be young and not have a family, and you can take more risk and invest and reinvest more in the agency than you would if you already have a family and are older, for example. Second, look at values. So this is broad, but what do you care about? What do you like to use your money for that feels like it would be a huge win? Or we want to make sure that your financial plan is aligned with this. Same thing with interest. What do you like to do for fun? What would you do more of? These interests often drive financial decisions and goals, so it's important to get clear on them. And then, getting into goals is the 4th area. When do you want to sell or maybe shut down the agency? How much money are you going to need to keep funding your lifestyle, keep taking your family skiing every year? That's just me. That's my ideal vacation, but yours could be anything. What expenses might be coming up that need planning for? Is the owner considering using their savings to pay for an acquisition? What about paying for long-term care down the road? Whatever the goals are, there should be a timing and a dollar amount and a frequency associated with them. And you might want to break them down like we do into needs, wants, and wishes. Also look at the fifth area we look at is just what's the asset picture look like? We want to know about any and all assets, whether that's bank accounts, real estate, investments, savings. We talk about the value of the agency and to what extent it should be included or not. Maybe not, if it's just you starting out, maybe we would include it if there's a history of profits and you've got employees and have done a valuation, among other things. But with all that, we want to see, where is someone at right now? Sixth area we get into is liabilities. So that's just what are all the sources of debt. Could be personal debt like home mortgages, car payments, credit cards. And then it's also worth us knowing about any business related debt as well. Maybe you've got a commercial mortgage. For example, there might be a conversation on how do we protect you if you as the borrower become disabled and can't work. Maybe that means business loan protection insurance. But overall, we want to just establish that view of assets and liabilities to start to calculate someone's net worth and make sure this is moving in a positive direction over time. Also, we get into insurance is a big one. Agency owners can have a variety of insurable needs and policies. Could be life insurance, disability income insurance, disability buy-sell policies, key person protection, business overhead expenses, business loan protection, property and casualty, and long-term care. So, yeah, we look at pretty much everything other than like medical and healthcare. Don't get into that, but what we want to make sure is that you have as much protection as makes sense for your goals and your situation. And then the eighth area we look at that I think is really relevant for agency owners when it comes to their financial plans is estate planning. And that's, what do you want to happen when you're gone? We want to review all of your retirement account beneficiaries, your will, your power of attorney, make sure you have a medical directive, review any trust documents and anything involved that's in estate planning. And, happy to connect people with a lawyer that can help with that if needed. And then kind of that final area is just who else is involved with the agency owner? Who are their other key advisors? It's important that we're in sync with other key members of someone's wealth team, like their CPA and estate planning attorney, like I mentioned. But yeah, all this is really crucial information so that we can collaborate with people together and put together a goals-based financial plan, implement it, and adjust and monitor it over time as life unfolds and things change.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our agency profitability toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. With that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. These 9 areas are really helpful in terms of the structure. So to recap, we had relationships, values, interests, goals, assets, liabilities, insurance, estate planning, and then the wealth team or the who else is involved in terms of advisors as kind of the crucial areas that you go through. Where is it that you typically see with clients, in particular the ones that are running agencies, where there's the most work to do, or there's the highest risk that there's going to be a big misalignment between their goals and what they're able to accomplish?
It's a great question. I think it maybe comes back to balancing reinvestment with building that wealth outside the agency and retirement planning, which is, it's tough. I think, there needs to be a balance, right? Like in investing, we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. We want to be diversified. Just because your agency or one asset class is doing really well, 1 year doesn't mean it's going to continue to do that well in the future. So you need to plan accordingly and protect yourself and your family. I guess, what that balance looks like, it's different for everyone, depending on where they currently are with their savings and assets, what their lifestyle looks like, what their future expenses and goals look like, what their family looks like, and how much time they have. One owner might already have a decent nest egg and they're at a point where they have enough and the projections look good when it comes to the likelihood they can fund all their future spending needs and have money left over at the end of the rainbow. Like this person maybe can more aggressively reinvest in the agency, or maybe that person's younger and can do that, or another person might need to start saving more outside the agency to create a bucket of retirement money that grows over time. um, Age is definitely a big factor. Starting saving at 25 versus 55 is a completely different thing when it comes to compounding growth. As we know, time is kind of that magical ingredient when it comes to potentially compounding investment returns.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest mistakes or misconceptions that you see people dealing with when you first start working with them?
That's a great question. I think people planning for what they hope might happen with their agency versus being realistic, and investing and taking profits based on like what's actually realistic. So a lot of people maybe more aggressively reinvest in the agency, like we just mentioned, than maybe they should. And it may be like this is what I'm reinvesting because I have this vision and I hope that I'm going to be able to scale and grow this. But in reality, it's really hard. Versus, you start to build the wealth outside the agency, and it may not be much to start with, but over time, generating 6, 8, 10% a year over 20 years and you're just, not having to do a whole lot of work to do that. It's pretty meaningful for people.
One of the things I've observed, and I'd be curious to see if you've observed the same thing, is I find a lot of people, especially in the United States, get hyper fixated on tax efficiency to the degree where it starts to feel like they're kind of picking up pennies in front of a steamroller a lot of the time. And I find that that manifests itself in a whole bunch of different ways. In some cases, it's like taking a minuscule salary and you're relying, mostly on dividends, for example, to draw income from the business, depending, of course, on their corporate structure. It could be, creating these very elaborate corporate structures to try to minimize tax. It could be, running a whole bunch of personal expenses through the business, or taking on expenses that they wouldn't otherwise take on just to kind of minimize their taxable income. There's a lot of examples of this, but is that something that you have found with clients at times, that they get down these rabbit holes that are the result of maybe inaccurate or incomplete, I suppose, information about like how to think about building wealth, in particular as a business owner?
Yeah, it's like you don't want the tail to wag the dog, so to speak. Like saving money on taxes is awesome, but that's not. I don't think that should maybe drive everything to the extent sometimes that maybe people think it should, I guess. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. Like, again, people end up with really, really low salaries and relying on dividends, but then the business isn't doing well. So they just end up like not drawing nearly enough money out of the business, to the degree that it might like personally be financially affecting them. I've seen lots of examples of people spending money on things that they wouldn't otherwise spend money on just to save some money on tax. I've seen examples of people moving to places they don't really want to live, Puerto Rico, for example, just to save money on tax. I think the biggest thing that we see at Parakeeto, just because we're like in the weeds with it, is all of this complexity, often very, very obfuscated financial statements that are designed to create the illusion of the lowest possible taxable income, often complicated corporate structures, and therefore the movement of money between these different entities. All of this additional complexity ultimately comes at the cost of the owner's visibility into how their business is actually performing, and therefore it is less profitable, and therefore, for every dollar that they're saving on tax, they're missing out on $3 of EBITDA. And so it's like the juice actually isn't worth the squeeze. And to your point, the tail is kind of wagging the dog. That lack of visibility and all the complexity kind of coming at the cost of their understanding of their own business is probably the most common one that we see. But that's partially because that's the world that we're playing in. We're trying to help them create clarity on that picture and often work against all of the trouble that those things can cause.
Yep. Yep. I think sometimes, I mean, it's common that personal and business financial finances get so tied in, and you really need to start thinking about from day one, if you can, how to keep them separate. Yeah, you can do some stuff where, like you said, maybe you can save some money on taxes and run some expenses through things, but yeah, it just makes it more complicated and hard to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which was around estate planning. And I think the thing I want to first zero into here is really as that relates to partners and other stakeholders in the business. So you've talked about a couple of, I think, important things here: insurance. You've talked about how to finance buyouts. What happens if someone has to leave the business or becomes incapacitated, or something of that nature. What are some of the important considerations when an owner has partners, in terms of how to make sure that that's been thought through and that they're in a good place in terms of covering their bases and planning for how that partnership is likely to play out over time?
Yep, that's great. It's a great topic. I think to start with, like, I'd caveat by saying it's really important to work with an estate planning attorney. As financial advisors, we can provide feedback and ideas as it relates to estate planning, but we don't offer that true legal advice. But yeah, you really need to have the basic documents in place. You need, at the end of the day, we'll kind of take a step back. It's like, why are we doing this? Well, we want to protect the owner and partners, protect their business and personal assets, and ensure that their wishes are carried out, when someone's not around anymore. So you definitely need a will that specifies how your personal and business assets should be handled. It's amazing how many people I talk to that don't have basic wills in place or haven't updated theirs in many years. So I guess one takeaway for anyone listening, I would say, get that done ASAP if you haven't. You definitely need a power of attorney that designates someone to make decisions on your behalf if you become incapacitated due to illness or injury. And then kind of getting into, dealing with partners. It's worth considering life insurance policies to provide liquidity for buy-sell agreements, so that, if you pass away or can't work, the agency, maybe it's the agency itself or the partners would have an insurance policy on your life to fund the buyout and ensure your family gets paid for your share, right? And then I guess the other thing is, there's partner side and multi-partner agencies. There's a lot of agencies that are sole proprietorships, and in that case, when the owner dies, the business effectively ends, right? Like, your business assets can be passed to heirs or successors, but any new owners would need to establish a new business entity at that point. So depending on where someone is, they might consider converting to an LLC or a corporation to make that transition smoother. But one thing, that's another just thing to do, like, right away for people as it relates to estate planning is, especially if you haven't done it recently, is just everyone should review their beneficiaries on relevant retirement accounts, investment accounts, as well as any life insurance policies. Like, you definitely want to make sure that your beneficiaries that are listed are up to date, so that if you pass away, those assets can pass to the people that you intend and not someone that you don't.
I imagine that related to this too, a big conversation is around intentional exit from the business. Planning for that. Is that on the table? What options are available? What's that going to look like realistically? Most of that, I would imagine, will get into things like partner buyouts, ESOPs, or potentially trying to sell or merge to another firm. But to your point, that's not the most common exit path. What advice do you have for folks that might be thinking about their retirement or, exiting the agency, and how to think through planning for that outcome.
Yep. I think with everything, it starts with thinking about goals. So, personal goals like having X dollars to spend each year when you're not working with the agency anymore, or maybe you've got to pay for a child's wedding down the road. Whatever those goals look like, you want to make sure that uh, what you have, and then the proceeds for any sort of sale or buyout align with those goals to the extent that it's possible. Not always, but to the extent that it is. And then I think thinking about business goals is really important too. So that would deal with how would you want the agency to function without you? Is it your vision to keep things mostly running as is? Are you trying to retain key employees and clients? What does that look like? With succession planning, agency owners need to think about who's going to take over the management and ownership of the agency after they're gone. So maybe it's a partner, a key employee, maybe it's a family member, whoever it is. You want to make sure that you're investing in training and developing that person and have a plan so that the potential successor is prepared to take everything over. And then, I guess back to the estate planning side, you want to make sure you have a lawyer help put a buy-sell agreement in place that outlines how the transition will occur. So you might have an entity purchase buy-sell that obligates the business to buy the interest of each departing or deceased owner. You might have a cross-purchase buy-sell where each owner buys a share of the departing owner's interest themselves. And then, there are variations on these. But the agreement that you have in place, and work with a lawyer on this for sure, but the agreement should outline under which conditions a sale would take place. Is it, what happens if someone passes away or can't work because they're disabled or retires? And also, how is that purchase going to be funded? For example, is it cash, a loan, installment sale, deferred compensation, life insurance? I think if the owner is thinking about selling the agency down the road, it's worth getting a valuation now, and at least every few years, and then putting together plans now for addressing things like improving your profitability, any issues with client concentration, predictability of your revenue. Talk to someone like Marcel so you can be prepared.
Yeah, shameless plug. If your problem is that you don't have enough profit, then let's fix that. And then you'll have the problem of too much profit. And then you could talk to Jason. I think you raised quickly at the end there another key component of that, which is how will the firm be valued in all of those situations? Often that's going to be pre-negotiated or written in to some degree into that buy-sell agreement. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it has implications in terms of like how much you're actually going to have your stake in the business valued at, but it also has implications in terms of planning for that outcome. Because if you know the formula ahead of time, then you can be often, without having to hire for professional valuation, getting a pretty good sense of what your net worth actually is, what that stake in the business is actually worth. And if you have an understanding of the terms, you can kind of predict what that liquidity will look like into the future. So I think there's a lot of value in going through that exercise, if nothing else, as a forcing function to clarify those heuristics so that you can actually have those in mind when you're planning for the future.
Yeah, totally. Definitely agree.
Well, Jason, I wish we had more time, but we're both busy people and we do have to run. So for those that are listening that might want to learn more about you and what you're doing, or might want to speak to you about their own financial plans, where should we send them in the show notes?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jason Peck. I tend to write articles there a couple times a week, so you can keep up with me there. Also, our website is everwisewealth.com. So take a look at that and get in touch. We'd love to chat with anyone, see if we can be helpful.
Awesome. So we'll have links to Jason's LinkedIn and website in the show notes. And with that, Jason, I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us today.
Thanks so much, Marcel. It's awesome being here. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at Parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.